about 5 Maryland suburbs of Washington, D.C. that you should consider moving to, and 1 you shouldn't. I'm Melissa Terzis, DC Real Estate Mama. This is my channel. All the things. You can subscribe and all that down in the corner. I don't know which corner it comes up in. And I'll put my contact info up. If you've got any questions about purchasing real estate here, I am more than happy to help you. All right, I'm jumping in my first suburb, Rockville, Maryland. I'm a fan of Rockville, you guys. Some people aren't, but I lived there for a few years and I actually really liked it. And I was single when I lived there. It makes my list for best suburbs for families though, and best all around suburb. This year, Wallet Hub put out their list of best small cities, and Rockville ranked number 1 in Maryland and ranked in the top 5 of all small cities in the country. So Rockville's also been called one of the most diverse cities as well. Lots of people can find their home here. Rockville is a large area. It's 13 square miles. You've got a highway, 270, and a main thoroughfare, 355, which is Rockville Pike, which bisect Rockville in half. So east of Rockville Pike has some older neighborhoods with mid-century homes. The western side of Rockville has newer neighborhoods and communities that were built a lot in the 80s and 90s and throughout the first few decades of the 2000s. So because Rockville is so large, it actually offers a ton of choices on neighborhoods. You can get a small ranch or rambler home in the eastern part of Rockville in the 400 to 600,000s. On the western side of Rockville, where the homes are newer, prices steadily climb from the 700,000s to over $1 million. The overall median price of single-family detached homes that sold in the past year was 700,000, and the average 797,000. There are a lot of shopping centers in Rockville too, with restaurants and stores, and the access to anywhere along 270 going all the way up to Frederick or down into Bethesda and DC are quite easy. If you want an urban lifestyle, you can have it. If you want something more suburban, you can find that here as well. So families like the schools in Rockville, which consistently rank very well, and they offer AP and IB programs. So number 2 is Kensington. So Kensington is a small town feel with easy access to both city life and the peaceful trails and greenery of Rock Creek Park. So Kensington is one of those areas that seem to really resonate with West Coasters, people who enjoy that laid back, down to earth vibe. It's often described as a great community and a great suburb for families. So homes start in the 500,000s for what people would coin a teardown, and they go into the 1 millions for a larger and newer home. The prices rise evenly, so you can find a house at pretty much any price point between the low and high end. Now, the median price of all homes sold in Kensington in the last year was $878,000, and the average price was $1 million. If you want to check out this small town in action, I would tell you to head to Howard Avenue, which is Antique Row. You can get lost for a few hours going in and out of the bookshops and the antique stores. Then you can grab some tacos or pizza, sit on a bench, and enjoy your food in Warner Circle Park. Right now, living in Kensington means that your kiddos could go to one of a variety of high schools. The eastern side of Kensington is part of what they call the DCC, which is the Down County Consortium. The DCC is a group of 5 high schools where students in Boundary, they've got preference based on the academic and arts or sports offerings at each high school. There's also a new high school coming, Woodward, which is going to alleviate the overcrowding. So stay tuned. I don't think the boundary lines are set because that's not going to happen for a couple years, 2026, depending when you're watching this video, might be now. So stay tuned on that so that, we'll know kind of where those boundaries are and what parts of Kensington might feed to the school. Now, explorekensington.com is a fantastic website which has everything you would want to know about Kensington. Kind of amazing. Next up is Bethesda. So Bethesda has a reputation for being very spendy and pricey. But if you are flexible on the home or you're willing to do some work, you can still get a home under $1 million. And great news, because you're surrounded by such high property values, guess what? Your property's always going to be a good investment. The one thing nobody ever has to ask me when they're buying in Bethesda is, will I ever lose value on this house or be underwater? So unlikely. The median price of all single-family detached homes that sold in the past year was $1.495 million, and the average was $1.678 million. Now, there are a lot of variety of homes here and different styles and different neighborhoods. The tree-lined streets have colonials, bungalows, arts and crafts, craftsman, mid-century, and everyone's favorite, the McMansion. That's the teardown, becomes the McMansion. Because Bethesda is so urban, there are townhouses and condos here too, and they are typically closer to the retail and shopping areas. The first time I drove through Bethesda, it was like 20-something years ago, but like it had an energy to me that I liked and I wanted to spend more time there. There's plenty of shopping here to include Bethesda Row, which is an outdoor shopping area filled with restaurants and shops. If you want to find my teenage daughter on a weekend, she'll be at Montgomery Mall with her friends. I do kind of low-key love that I can drop her off at the mall with her friends like I used to go to the mall in the 80s. And no, I don't follow her around. I feel like it's safe enough. The Bethesda Eater has very high standards. If a restaurant cannot get a 4+ star out of 5 stars here, it won't last. Bethesda is really home to many fabulous restaurants. You've got Italian, Mexican, Lebanese, French, Greek, pizza, American, Asian. But just because they have high standards doesn't mean that every restaurant is fancy. If you spot a place that looks like it's sort of lacking in ambiance or could be coined what we would say a dive, don't let that discourage you. Just know that it has survived in Bethesda for good reason. Bethesda generally just doesn't attract a dive bar crowd. So if it's in business, it must be good. Next up is one we don't talk about a lot, but it's Silver Spring. So Fortune magazine just announced in 2024 that Silver Spring ranks #1 on the list of the 50 best places for families to live in the United States. The overall data that they used focused on education, affordability, livability, and one we don't always see in these lists, resources for aging adults. They also analyzed diversity and home prices in a metric against the state and the national median. So Silver Spring has an excellent location. It's just due north of DC. What the Fortune article may not have adequately explained or understood, though, is that there are a couple Silver Spring identities. There's downtown, where you have over 100 restaurants, arts, and entertainment venues, and more of a city feel than even downtown. Then as you head north from downtown, there are really a collection of neighborhoods straddling the Beltway that are super with, exciting for families. They're Four Corners, Woodside Park, Forest Glen, Woodmore. Then you have all the areas north of there that, you might be thinking, looking at a map, might have addresses like Wheaton, Kent Mill, or Colesville. No, they all have Silver Spring addresses too. So these houses are usually on larger lots and definitely larger houses from what you see to the south. The median sales price for single-family detached homes in the last year is $640,000, and the average price is $682,000. All right, next up, Frederick. God, hear me out. Don't leave. 5 years ago, there was no way in hell I would have ever put Frederick on this list. My first introduction to Frederick was, oddly, when I lived in Atlanta 25 years ago. My then boyfriend's bestie was from Frederick, and he used to call it Fredneck or Fred Rock. In the early 2000s, builders started heading to Frederick County for more affordable land. Pre-COVID and, before, working from home was an option, there were constantly Washington Post and other media articles about people's 2 to 3 hour commutes from Frederick to DC. So while the development came, the vibe of Frederick, though, didn't really change until more recently, I would say, and even more post-COVID. Today, the heart and soul of Frederick feels more like down-to-earth Baltimore, to me at least, than it does of like a DC outpost, right? It's not just like all the DC people left, went to Frederick and made Frederick into a mini DC. Definitely doesn't feel like that. It feels more sophisticated than it did 10 or 20 years ago. And I've had several people in the last year ask me about Frederick, and I've helped people buy homes there. On a good day, it's less than an hour to get there from like lower Montgomery County. On the worst days, it maps to 90 minutes from like DC up to Frederick. But it's still not like those 2 to 3 hour commutes of the early 2000s. And you can get some pretty awesome houses in the $500,000 to $600,000, but there's homes at every price point. The average price of all single-family homes sold in the last year in Frederick was $635,000. The median price was $625,000. How's that for good stats, you guys? There's just as many homes under $625,000 as there are over $625,000. Now, I saved the best for last. The downtown of Frederick is so stinking cute. There are so many cool restaurants and places to go. This is no longer a bedroom community with a long commute. Frederick has become a nice, cute little city in its own right. All right, we finally got there. What is the one place you should not move in Maryland? Baltimore. I know. It never fails that somebody looks at a map, they see Baltimore, and they think if they could take the train that it's commutable to DC. And I mean, I guess, yeah, like it sort of is. I've known a few people who have done it. They never do it for long, though. They either get a job in Baltimore or they move back further south. Now, the train from Baltimore will take you to Union Station. Depending on where you work, that may not be convenient. You will possibly need to hop on Metro, making what's already a long commute even longer, because we have not even covered what happens to you when you're getting to the train in Baltimore. There are only a couple train stations, and they aren't really super close to the neighborhoods where at least I know and I would want to live. So don't get me wrong, crime aside, I am a Baltimore fan. I actually wasn't always. I lived there a couple of years as well. When I moved to DC, though, I actually, in hindsight, developed this like real appreciation for Baltimore. People are so nice there. It is so much less expensive. There are some really cool neighborhoods. We actually own a house in the Hampton neighborhood of Baltimore, which is all kinds of awesome. I'm only sad that we bought it like too late in my life that I can't live there. But you know, Canton, Fells Point, Federal Hill, Hampton, they're just so many neighborhoods that are so awesome. My husband's from Greektown, which, you know, actually hit some rough years, but it's kind of like on the upswing now. There's development happening there too. I will also go on record to say here that I think the restaurants in Baltimore are actually probably better than a lot of DC's restaurants, but you have to take that with your own grain of salt. I'm not a foodie. I kind of like when I go for an Italian restaurant, I want to go in, I want it to be old world. I want it to look like your grandfather's working there with the red checkered tablecloths. I don't want like fancy white tablecloths. That's just not what I want. Anyway, the Michelin stuff it doesn't really appeal to me. So you have to, like I said, take what I'm saying about food with a grain of salt, depending on how you approach and feel about restaurants. But there's a lot of old world kind of places in Greektown and Little Italy, and they are so fun and so great to go to. Now, the houses in Baltimore are definitely inexpensive. The median price of all single-family row homes that sold in the last 6 months, $225,000. The average price, $250,000. Another grain of salt, if you have any left, though. Baltimore, you have to take into account that Baltimore has a lot of boarded up houses, and they're going to sell for like $10,000 to $15,000. And they're also in terrible neighborhoods. So if you pull out the neighborhoods I mentioned, which are Canton, Fells Point, Federal Hill, and Hampton, the median price for row homes sold in the last 6 months in those neighborhoods is $359,000. The average price, $398,000. I actually would say that's a better representation of the possibility here. If you didn't have kids who needed public schools and you only went to DC once a week, I would say this is totally possible, but you would have to be really committed to and really love the charm of what they call Charm City. So that is my Maryland recap of the suburbs that I think you should look at, one you probably shouldn't. And if you have any questions, my contact info is coming next.